I am super, super excited to have this amazing opportunity to interview my next guest. He was on CNN, The Today Show, NPR, and I am strongly advising everyone to read his book. It's called The End of Stress, and it's 4 steps to rewire your brain. As many of you who know me, the brain has always been a passion of mine. Recently, I'm into healing the inner child, and I think Don will probably agree with. I mean, it's we really need to stop choosing to allow stress to cause diseases and cause us to be mentally and physically, and emotionally just ill. But a little bit background on Don. He was an executive at Stanford Med School. He's executive director of the Center for Spiritual Exchange, the official archive for the works of Anthony DeMello. It's regarded as one of the great spiritual minds of the 20th century, influencing Eckhart Tolle, who also is a life changer. Anyone who has been reading him, and he's also the author of the book that I just showed you, The End of Stress. 4 steps to rewire your brain. I think a lot of you are saying there is no way I can get rid of stress, and Don's here to share how it is very, very possible. I love his mission. He's committed his life to helping people understand. And I love how you put quiet stress and anxiety and navigate life's challenges creatively, right? And live happier, more fulfilled lives. Thank you, Don. Could you just give a little backstory of how you even started this journey of trying to end stress and writing about it, researching about it? How did it affect you to the point of like making it your life mission?
Well, I came into it the hard way. Uh, about 30 odd years ago, excuse me, I experienced what I have come to think of as my perfect storm of stress. I was working at Stanford University Medical School, and I lost my job. I'd spent more than a decade climbing the career ladder to get to that level, and from one day to the next, it was gone. And 9 days after that, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And at the time, I was married. I had four kids, so this was a catastrophe. Of course, I had a home with a big mortgage, and it had to be paid. And so the doctors counseled me to be prepared for the worst. That it may be that the surgery there'd be collateral damage from the surgery because the brain's very delicate, and you mess with an area, you may disturb another area that have huge ramifications. And it was in a very delicate place, a place that controlled vision, hearing, um, face, so balance. And so they warned me you could end up very impaired, maybe unable to ever work again. And so I was terrified. And I had 2 weeks before I had 4 weeks before the surgery. And the in the transition out of my job at Stanford, my golden parachute required me to come back to work there for a period of time, almost right up to the time of my scheduled surgery. Um, and so I had to go back into that was very stressful. I had to go back into that environment where I thought that I'd been given a raw deal. I thought that I had enemies. All those.
Hmm.
It was a high level job, so it was very stressful. It was so um, for the first 2 weeks, I was in abject misery. I would wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and sit all alone in my living room. I'd stare out the window into the cold, dark night, certain that um, my family was doomed. We were going to end up homeless and feeling terrible shame that I'd failed them. And this went on for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks of that, every single night of going through those dark nights, I reached the point where I began to question what was worse, the scenario was painted for me about what my future was likely going to be, or the abject fear that was actually happening, that was actually forming the reality that I was living in. And I had been counseled by somebody I trusted it very much to years and years ago to whenever I was fearful to use a process of letting it go. And I'd actually taught this technique to people, but I'd never used it on myself. And it was a very simple process, really. It involved opening up to the fear that I was in, opening up to the pessimism, opening up to the anxiety, opening up to all the gloom and doom, not trying to change anything, not trying to interfere with it at all, but allowing it to arise, to come up. Um, a lot of people in Hawaii surf, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this process is kind of like that because when I did that, I jumped into it. I'm going to let myself be as frightened as I am. I thought it would be kind of an easy little process, and at the end of it, things would calm down. Well, no, the amount of fear I was in was enormous, and it swelled enormously. And my grandson who lives in Hawaii, he surfs, and he describes how when you hit a wave, a big wave out there in the ocean, and you jump up on your board and you're riding it in, there's no turning back,
Mm-hmm.
and either that wave is going to take you into shore, or it's going to throw you underwater and maybe kill you. Well, that's what it felt like to me. That's the wave I was riding. There was nothing I could do about it. But to my amazement is that after not a very long time, it was one of those things that was not a very long time that felt like forever.
Mm-hmm.
One of those deals, like when you're in pain, you
Yeah.
know. And but to my amazement, the wave came to shore. The wave of fear subsided and left me in a place of relative calm. Was such a relief. you know it was like, if you can imagine, um, having like you drop something on your toe and it's been agonizing, and suddenly the pain stops. That's the
Mm-hmm.
way it felt to me. Well, and a little while later, I managed to paint myself right back into that fearful corner. My ego said, as I relaxed, said, you can do this process all day long you want. You're still screwed. At the end of the day, you're still screwed. Don't fool yourself. And so those thoughts would come back. And so the wave would come back up. I surrendered to it again. And what I began to notice through iterations of this, 3 or 4 times going through this process, is that I came to the understanding that this fear, this reaction, this pain, this suffering that was going on, it was in me. It wasn't in my situation. My situation was my situation. I mean, if I would have describe it to the man on the street, they would have been unaffected by it. Well, it doesn't affect me, right? Everything in life that happens, reality is always neutral. Um, how we experience reality has to do with our own mind, what our mind does with it, how we react to it. And I could see that this is mind made. This pain I'm in is mind made. And this serious situation that I face, it is what it is. I finally got to that point. And when I got to that point of seeing that, um, rode the wave out, saw that, calmed down, I finally relaxed into this space that opened up, this quiet space that opened up inside of me. And as I relaxed into it, what I experienced was it expanded. And it expanded to the point I was at peace. And I knew it was at peace because when I turned and looked out that window, in which I saw this black hole that was going to suck my family into oblivion, it had changed. And what I saw was there's this beautiful, beautiful oak tree that we had in front of our house, very old, must have been 200-300 years old. And the moonlight was shimmering on the leaves, and it made the night look sacred instead of this oblivion that I was seeing. And I realized that the night hadn't changed. I had changed. I had made a shift. And so I made up my mind right then and there that I was going to let go of fear in this very simple way of allowing it to come up whenever it raised its head, allowing myself to feel those feelings. We tend to suppress them, we tend to repress them, or we tend to try to turn them into something else.
Mhm.
Use it, throw a positive affirmation on them. And what tends to happen, what's tended to happen to me is that, so I push the fear out the front door, and 2 or 3 seconds later it was coming through the back door, tapping me on the shoulder. So you think you were getting rid of me? No, no. And it's what the great poet Robert Frost said, is that you don't go around life, you go through life. And fear is a part of our experience. And so I went back to work after that night, and for the next couple of weeks, I didn't get stressed in the way that I usually got stressed. And I looked at this major project that I had to bring to a conclusion. I had a clear sense of the priorities of what I could get done and what I probably would never get done. And I had this tendency to be rather obsessive compulsive about work. We will get everything done, to drive myself. And it was stress provoking. And when I looked at it, I went, if I get these three things done well, this will be good enough. But if I try to do these other things I don't have time for, this isn't going to end up turning up, because I won't give attention to what could have been good enough. I had that clarity. And so, people that I thought were my enemies, the political enemies, I began to look at them differently. Like, it's I don't know if I didn't make that up in my head too. I mean, I made up this whole reaction. I'm misperceiving people. Like Anthony DeMello says, we don't see people and events in our lives as they actually are. We see them as we are.
Mm.
You know, and when we're afraid, of course, we see enemies. And then when we see enemies, we move into our brain moves us into attack and defense, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So I just made a separate peace with the world, with Stanford University. And when I reported to, so I mean, fear came up, but I didn't indulge it. I can actually say that during that period before surgery, I had lots of fearful moments, but I processed them in this way. I didn't indulge them. I got free of them. You know, each and every time they came up, I freed myself from them in this way. And again, I allowed them to come up. I understood this is happening in me, not in reality. They uh, they will pass. They're mind-made illusions. Everything passes in this world, especially emotional reactions. I tell people all the time, the emotional upset you had last month, you can't even remember what it was. You can
Right.
barely remember what it was related to, but at the moment you thought it was it was the most profoundly important thing that and serious thing that happened to you, but it's an illusion. It's just your mind made it. It's your attitude that you projected onto it. So at any rate, I reported the surgery. The surgery was a complete success. In fact, it made the surgeon famous. Um, and and I got my job back at Stanford. I wasn't in that department. It was an department that's actually better suited for me. It was a department of psychiatry. The chairman of the department of psychiatry heard about this guy who lost his job in Department of Medicine, got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and everybody was amazed at, because he had this incredible attitude as he faced, checkmate, what appeared to be checkmate. And so after the surgery, he called me and he said, I want you to come in and interview with me. And he offered me the job to be his chief operating officer. And he said, my department needs, this godforsaken department is what he called it, needs an attitude like yours. And I want you to come in here and infect everybody. And so I got my job back. And so I stayed in that job for another 3 years, and or maybe a little longer. And then one day I just decided that this isn't what I was born to do. And so I began to look around for a position that would work in an area that was helping people make the kind of shift that I had made in the face of catastrophic life events. And I found it, first of all, it was during the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco
Mm.
when it was at its height. So I ended up running an agency that uh, provided support to men with AIDS when there was really nothing, really no other support you could provide than to help them die. And it was a really powerful experience. And then I was hired at the Center for Attitudinal Healing, which was founded by the famous psychiatrist Jerry Jampolsky, who wrote the book Love is Letting Go of Fear. I recommend that to everybody, a life-changing book. And we worked with some of the most stressful places on earth, some of the most stressful situations human beings get into, from people who are life threatened, like I was, to spouses and siblings and children who are grieving the loss of somebody who had died, to parents who had lost children, probably one of the most grief-stricken thing a person goes through, to prisoners in San Quentin prison. And Clinton administration actually even sent us into Croatia and Bosnia during that genocidal war to work with refugees who were experiencing severe post-traumatic stress, like Ukrainians are experiencing right now. And I think Bosnia was even worse than what we're seeing in Ukraine, although Ukraine could get there. But situation, the success that we had at teaching people how to make the shift from fear to peace, that's what it boiled down to, um, was very effective and was highly acknowledged internationally. In 2005, the center won the Excellence in Medicine Award from the American Medical Association, and then I went out and took that approach and began to teach it in in very stress prone corporate environments. And that's when I end up writing The End of Stress, Mystic Cool, those two books. And now I'm consulting with the Center for Spiritual Exchange, which dives into Anthony DeMello. And the core approach that I taught in The End of Stress is awareness, is bringing it, the very awareness process that I went through myself, that Tony DeMello teaches, that Carl Rogers, the great American psychologist, teaches. Um, so that's the core of that book. And then later, I was invited to come in and help uh, promote more of Anthony DeMello's work out in the world. He died in 1987, but he's still a big force in the world. So that's how I came into this work.
Wow. Yeah, I just finished his book, and then I just thought I need to have you share your wisdom on why we should stop fixing ourselves. Are we broken? And why is awareness the key to changing us, getting rid of stress, or like you said, that mental illusion that causes us to feel, like you said, that we are doomed, that there's no hope. How do we?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the way we get programmed and the way society programs us, socializes us, and how that socialization ends up turns into the way our brain gets wired. Um, so, the one reason people should consider a process like Anthony DeMello's awareness process is that when you look at the data, when you look at the research, there's only 4% of the population here in our country where people say that they're completely happy. And the irony is, we were born happy.
Hmm.
It's in our nature. When science looks to see what is human nature, they look at children.
Hmm.
And so I invite everybody, go out and look at children. Next time you're in a grocery store or you're passing a playground, watch the children. You're watching your core essential nature. We were born happy. We were born free as children can be. But we've become trapped in our own limited thinking. We're born with an open heart that stress and fear so easily close. We're born gifted. beings of immeasurable worth, but we often feel like we're not good enough. That's shame. 80% of us, according to the research, are suffering with some degree of shame. The mystics, all the mystics tell us there's a divinity of joy within us and surrounding us that's there to make our lives meaningful and beautiful and rich, but we've become blocked from seeing it. DeMello says, it's as if we're all hypnotized to see what's not there and not see what is there. And so, all of those wonderful innate qualities that reflect our essential nature, they've been programmed out of us. They've been stamped. What's happened to us is that we've been stamped with the belief that happiness and self-worth are found out there in the world. And if we, work long and hard enough, success will come. And out of that, happiness and fulfillment will follow. But most people have swallowed that formula. I've coached a ton of people who have, and they swallow that formula, and 10 years later they realize that success has come, but it's come without fulfillment. It's come without any sense of inner peace. It's come without any sense of joy, any sense of worth. And that's failing at life. Tony Robbins says success without is the ultimate failure in life. Well, waking up is the realization that contrary to what society has taught us, nothing, but absolutely nothing of the world can make us happy. It's not that the success is unimportant. It's not that having things is unimportant, but success is not the same as fulfillment. And most people don't understand that. They're waiting for the ship to come in. But the ship, if the ship is happiness and fulfillment, it's already come in. It's inside them, but they don't know it. They don't see it. We're living in the kingdom of joy unsuspectingly. We're blind to it. So fulfillment doesn't come from the world. That's the first thing we got to get. Happiness doesn't come from the world, not that radiant happiness that I'm talking about of a child that is constant, that makes you smile for no reason, that's resilient, that, when you get knocked down, you bounce right back into. Happiness, fulfillment, peace, self-worth, that comes from within you. And the truth is, there's not a single moment in our lives when we don't have all that we need to be happy. And we're wired for it, actually. And the only reason we're ever unhappy is because we're focusing on what we don't have rather than on what we have right now. And that's called an attachment. An attachment is anything any person, thing, or outcome that you believe that you cannot be happy without.
Mhm.
That's called an attachment. And it's the cause of your suffering. I often invite people, take out a blank piece of paper and at the top write, I cannot be happy or fulfilled until or unless, and then start making your list. And you'd be surprised how quickly people write things down. They write down, I cannot be happy until I'm out of debt. I cannot be happy unless my spouse agrees I'm right and he or she's wrong. I cannot be happy until my boss appreciates me. I can't be happy until I get my degree. I can't be happy, it just goes on and on and on. And then I tell people once they get that all down, I say, now those are attachments, look at it. And remember what the Buddha said, the source of all suffering is attachment. So look at your list of attachments, look at your list of suffering. And in that new book that I edited of Tony DeMello's work, Stop Fixing Yourself, um, what it does, it helps you rediscover that truth about yourself. And to answer your question, what you discover is that it's a process of discovering you're not broken. You're not a problem to be solved. You're okay. If there's a problem, it's the way you've been programmed to believe that without this or that outcome, you can't be happy is a false belief. And it gets wired into your brain. And what happens in your brain when something like that gets wired in there, it makes your amygdala, your limbic system, your emotional brain, where fight, flight, or freeze, where stress reactions happen, it makes it stronger. What happens is that as you're stressing, stressing to get that job, to be right, to have more money, what all those things that you stress about every day that you return home exhausted from doing, you know, as you do that and you stress, you're dumping stress hormones into your system. And these stress hormones, what they do, they're like a cocktail for that part of your brain that sets off stress reactions. They actually cause it to grow stronger. And it has the opposite effect on the prefrontal cortex, where the seat of your creative and emotional and fluid intelligence reside. All the things that make you great as a human being, all those neurocircuits that connect with the right brain that allows you to be creative and allows you to be positive and feel positive emotions. It causes those neurocircuits to shrink. And that's called fear conditioning. Society has fear conditioned you, and that's why you're unhappy. That's why you feel unfulfilled. And so science used to believe that, once your brain gets wired in a certain way, that's it. You're screwed. That's your lot in life. Well, in the last 25 years, as you well know, Karen, uh, science has discovered that we can change our brains. Change of experience, but that changes. Say this a little more simply: a change of experience changes our brain. So the operative question is, what changes our experience? And the answer to that is our attitude. Our attitude and our experience, they're intertwined. That's what Shakespeare meant when he went, uh, one man's meat is poison to one person, it's meat to another person,
Hmm.
And so the thing is that your attitude influences directly what you experience. So, if it's as simple as that. If you have a problem and your initial attitude towards that problem is pessimistic, is that, oh, I can't solve this. Your boss adds another thing to your to-do list, which is already pretty big, already fat, and you go, okay, that's it, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do it, I'm not going to be able to solve this. But a little while later, something comes along, something changes in the situation, and you look at this again, and you see, well, I actually can do that. And then suddenly, what happens is, because of that shift in attitude, you move from seeing it as a problem to now seeing it as a challenge that excites you. Well, a change, any kind of change in consistently happenings that changes your experience begins to change your brain, and as quickly as 4 weeks. So one of the ways in which you can sort of globally change your experience, in, in a way that changes your brain, is to get deprogrammed, deprogrammed all that societal nonsense that has you believing things that aren't even true, to be, and they got wired into your brain. Get that deprogrammed. And the question around that is, how are you going to do that? And the answer is awareness. And the process I described that I went through is how it works. First thing you need to do, get in touch with those negative, upsetting feelings that you're usually not aware of, or that you tend to push away or repress. Feelings like being nervous and tense and stressed, or feeling hurt feelings, feeling insulted by somebody, um, or feeling disappointed, or feeling gloom and moodiness, or shame that may even turn into self-hatred. Um, any of those negative feelings that you're feeling, let them come up. Let yourself experience them. Look at them, feel them. Watch the thoughts that they generate in you. And and then tell yourself, the second step, tell yourself, uh, these feelings, this negativity, this upset, it's in me. It's not in reality. I'm superimposing that on reality. And it's not my fault. Don't judge yourself for it. I've been programmed to do this, you know? And so, according to Anthony DeMello, I get deprogrammed by moving through this process. And the third step is, don't identify with those negative feelings. You are not your fear. You are not your depression. You are not your shame. Those are just feelings. That's your illusion. That's your mistake. And your brain is very literal. So that when you say to your brain, "I am depressed," it goes, "Oh, okay, he's depressed. Let's get depression going here." Let's
Hmm.
dump stress hormones into it. I'm afraid. Oh, there must be a threat out there. Let's dump a bunch of stress hormones in there. You can, what you can say is, very calmly, um, depression is there right now. My experience is depression. My experience is fear right now, but not I am depressed. That's
Hmm.
the mistake. DeMello talks about it's like throwing black paint into the air. What happens to the paint? Does it contaminate the air? No, the paint goes up, it comes down and lands on the ground and soaks into the ground. But the the blue sky, it remains uncontaminated. Well, you're the blue sky. Your basic nature is blue sky. So that as you look at that feeling that's coming up, clouding over your blue sky, just write it out. Understand this is my reaction, and it will eventually pass. It'll come down, leaving you to be that blue sky, and then you will just relax into it. And don't judge yourself for having the reaction. If you do end up judging yourself, then process that through awareness. Process that shame. That's shame based. So process that. But as you begin to move through the process, it will pass. And then when it passes, it will open up, you will open up to a space and relax into that space. Become silent. Just be with it for a moment. And what you will see is that happiness, that peace, that wonderful feeling of worth, a feeling of connection to all that is will naturally arise in you all by itself without you having to do anything. And so that's what DeMello means when he says, stop fixing yourself. You're trying to fix yourself from the level of your programming, and all you're doing is reinforcing your programming. So just sit back and watch how your programming is running your emotional state and realizing that this is in you. This is just the programming. It's not it. There's nothing real about it. It's illusion until it passes. And now you're free, and then give in to being free. You do that for a couple of weeks. You do that for and then you end up making that the way you relate to life, everything that comes and goes in life. You will reach the point where you can shift out of fear and stress the second it raises its ugly head, and that's enlightenment. Enlightenment doesn't mean these enlightened people. It doesn't mean that they don't have fearful thoughts now and then. They don't get discouraged now and then. But what they have programmed their brain to do is shift them out of it almost seamlessly at the moment it arises. So it's just a little teeny little blip on the screen instead of completely taking them over. That's enlightenment, at least from a neurological standpoint.
Wow. My last question is, and I think you were talking about like the childlike happiness. As an educator, I just this past week, I've had two boys, 8 and 9, really expressing anger and not wanting to live. And I know they didn't really mean it literally, but when I asked why, it was because they kept getting yelled at and they didn't want to do homework. And like you said, their entire being was so frustrated because, and they're 8. They're 8 and 9.
Mm.
I have 14-year-olds who just they can't sleep at night because of fearing that their grades will lower or disappoint their parents or have their phone taken away because of, academic disappointment. Is there a way that they can rewire their brains while their parents are, you know what I mean? The parents are, we are programming, right? You need to get a good grade so you can get a scholarship, so you can get into a good college, so you can be happy. But this stress that we put upon these young kids, I mean, how can parents realize that, like you said, that because all of my students, I've been doing this for over 28 years, they all feel broken because they all define their worth by grades.
Sure. Yeah, they're all defining themselves by the outside world and how the outside world views them. And they
Mm-hmm.
need to win the approval of the outside world. And they end up chasing that approval all of their lives and
Yes.
end up not knowing anything about who and what they are. There's this, Stanford, one of the ways that might wake up parents is that Stanford's in a crisis right now because some of their best scholars and some of their best scholar athletes two of them committed suicide because the pressure finally cracked them. And nobody's doing up until that point. Nobody was doing anything about it other than to keep the pressure on them, and it finally broke it. So that might wake up parents to think about it. One thing you can do as a teacher, those two boys are really lucky to have a teacher like you. That's the first thing to acknowledge. Um, they have this program that got started um, by a woman by the name of Megan Cowan. It's called Mindful Schools. And check it out. They have a way of working with kids to get kids in. They were working in Oakland at first, in school districts where there's a lot of stress in the
Hmm.
communities where these kids are growing up, and they had a big impact. And so it's really grown. Now it's all over the country. It's called Mindful Schools. Check it out. But you can also, um, and you might pick up some tips about how do you get through an 8-year old, because they don't like to sit still for very long.
Right.
But but you could do that, and then the other thing you could do is once you get a few tricks that from the mindful school people, um, you can teach them DeMello's awareness process. So for them not to, one of the things that where we all start in this awareness process, it, the threshold we have to cross over is not being afraid of being afraid.
Yes.
So
Wow. That's
that's
pretty
what you got
enlightening.
to get through to those kids. Those kids are afraid of being afraid. And so they
Yes.
they need to, it takes courage to cross that threshold. But once you cross that threshold, what you discover is what looks so large from a distance, close up is not that big. You begin to understand, wow, when I allow myself to feel it, when I don't take it seriously, when I realize this is the way I've been programmed, boom, it passes, it disappears. Then they can from a point of experience, they know fear's an illusion and fear doesn't work. That's the main problem. Most people think the problem with most people is they think that fear protects them. And it does when you are in a real and present danger. But like when you're at war, or when somebody's mugging you,
Hmm.
or when you've been in a car accident, then fight, flight, or freeze does what it was intended to do, to give you reactive reaction speed to get out of that trouble as quickly as possible. But it only lasts for 5 minutes. The body can only handle that full blown stress uh, reaction for 5 minutes. But what happened to us is that our brain, our lower brain, that part that sets off the fight, flight, or freeze reaction, it can't tell the difference between a real and present danger and one you made up in your head. And it sets off a stress reaction, maybe not as big as a full blown one when you're in a car accident, but it's still dumping stress hormones. And those stress hormones shrink the brain power and the creative power that your brain could give you. It expands the part that makes you more fearful, more stressed. It dampens your immune system. It affects your DNA so that your body starts putting out abnormal cells that cause cancer and prematurely age you. That's why a person who's been, chronically stressed looks so much older
Hmm.
than their chronological age. They look 10, 20 years older. Look, some of the pictures of the president when he started office. Look at Obama. He
Yeah.
looks like a young spring chicken when he leaves. His head's full of gray hair. He's got lines. Um, and, his wife couldn't have been happier that he was prevented from doing a third term. It killed Lyndon Johnson, the presidency. That was stress that killed him. And so that's because of and then it's at the core of uh, coronary disease, because what happens when those stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, what they do is they cause your heart to pump faster, and they expand your um, blood vessels. And so what happens is that it's like a water pumping station. It's pumping out, and so the water station, it pumps out into really large part uh, pipes at first, and then they bifurcate into smaller pipes, and then smaller pipes until you reaches your faucet and it comes out in a way that's good. But what happens with the heart is that if it's a constant force, those pipes down the line break, they fracture. And now you start having, and in those fractures, cholesterol collects. And now you have an occlusion. And you keep going in that direction, you're going to have a massive heart attack and it's going to kill you.
Well,
And
that's what I'm
so,
noticing. Yeah, I'm
yes,
noticing that a lot of young people are having heart attacks. Is there a way to, because parents think I am going to punish my children into being motivated. I'm going to take your way of your phone. I'm going to take away privileges, but it's a very punitive way of discipline. What is your view on how parents, does it really work? Saying, you know what, you need to get your grades up or else. And then the child feels so much stress, like you said, and they're a child. When you're a teenager or when you're a child and you feel this huge, huge pressure to get a good grade and your entire worth, because, the cell phone is their entire life. What can parents realize? Because, a lot of parents feel like they need to know that this is serious and they need to get serious about academics. What is your insight on how parents can, how is it dangerous to their child's brain to keep pushing, pushing, pushing?
yeah, it is. It's not only the parents' fault. The schools are that way,
Yes.
and particularly schools that my grandchildren went to a school over there in Kauai that is a prep school. They they pride themselves on their graduates going to good universities, right?
Hmm.
And it's relentless. The homework, the stacks of homework they give them, and all of that. Um, and yet they turn out good minds. They can think. They can reason. I mean, I understand that they train these kids' brains to work well and to work their way through problems, but they don't train them how to deal with their spiritual self, how to deal with their emotional self. They don't train them at all in that way. And so as a result, since that's not, they don't see that as a part of the whole picture. They've only got a little piece of the picture, and they're driving that thing home.
Hmm.
And and it comes at the expense of that child's spiritual and emotional well-being. And so there's got to be, that's what mindful school is really all about. How can we bring this also into the curriculum so that a child can work hard but love it,
Yes.
you know, and and also a child can run into emotional distress and know what to do with it, know how to work through it, and that the teachers are also on the same page with the kids. They are working towards that same spiritual growth and emotional intelligence for themselves that is a part of the curriculum for the children. That's the kind of change that needs to happen, and it can happen. You know, um, you can still excel. The thing about one of the things that the mellow is telling us about, um, detach from all these attachments you have, like attachment to my kid going to Stanford, you know,
Hmm.
attachment to going to Harvard or wherever they're attached. Um, that's a parent's attachment, really,
It
because
is.
that parent's going to get some sort of kudos for themselves. My kid went to Stanford, but even though their kid could care less about that. And so the thing about it is what DeMello was saying is that detach from that. Let that go. I cannot be happy unless my kid gets straight A's. That's you and your kid are going to suffer with that. Let that go. And it doesn't mean that you don't pursue things out there in the world, but you don't confuse what you're pursuing out there in the world with what can make you happy in life. you know you just got to get that straight. That's what detachment's about, is that I'm going for this A in this course, and I'm not fooling myself that if I get the A or get a B, or even if I flunk, that my happiness and self-worth is that question here. That's the detachment he's going for. And if you can get to that place, and awareness will get you to that place, then when you pursue that A, you enjoy it. I mean,
Yes.
you enjoy the process. And really, is there any other way to enjoy a process than to be detached from the outcome? All of psychology, every major field of psychology has within its principles, let go of the outcome. Let
Mhm.
the outcome take care of itself. Jesus said it. Let tomorrow take care of tomorrow. Just be present right here, right now. Focus in on what you're doing. You know, love the thing that you love. If you're going to bump into some part of it that you don't love, use awareness to move you through that resistance that you're experiencing, to get past it, to work through that. I mean, life on earth is not always going to be, totally perfectly happy. There are things that come up. We have our but children need to be taught this other part of the equation.
Yes.
And mindfulness schools is making a huge impact. And so if you could learn something from that and put it together with DeMello, uh, and have the whole class do it, so these kids aren't, uh, you know, sort of got a spotlight on them. They're weird. There's something's wrong with them. But have the whole class do it.
But that's what I
Um,
love to do because I'm a private tutor, so it's one on one. But I've been doing experiments maybe the past couple of years where I start off with like a candle, then a meditation, and then inhale,
Beautiful,
exhale. But they're
beautiful.
5. When they're older, they do think it's silly. But then there are ways to do that where, oh, let's pretend you're blowing your birthday candle out, but you're doing it really slowly, and it truly is a mindset shift because most
Yes.
of the time these kids are like, they only have 3 problems left. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Why do I have to do it? And all that wasted energy is focused on that, when in 5 minutes that whole thing could have been done. But like you said, it is that resistance. So this, maybe
That
this
was a
8 year
story of
old.
most of my life,
Yeah.
what you just described there, until I
Well, then I'm
wised up.
realizing, yeah, I think all of us, because I was that, academic achiever, and even as an educator, I thought my end goal was to make sure that their homework was done, that they understood it, that they're goal oriented. And only in the past, I think 3 or 4 years, I realized that's not the goal. The goal is enjoyment of learning and really teaching them, like what you said. I mean, everything that you've said, it will change parenting. It will change the way that we raise our children, and it would be such a great gift, don't you think, to give our children the gift of like knowing that they're perfect the way they are, no matter what their grade is, no matter if they get dropped off the soccer team or they don't get chosen for a certain thing that they're trying for, right?
As long as they're processing it, as long as
That's
they're
the part.
processing it with awareness, then the awareness will bring them through to that place in which they experience, I'm okay either way.
Yeah.
I'm still happy either way. I'm still whole either way. The one thing that the researcher Brene Brown found, her research on shame, was that there was only one variable that separated a shame-based personality from one that is not shame-based. And it turns out 80% of the population is shame-based. I mean, it's
Hmm.
huge. Most of it, and that's because most parents, most schools, most workplaces believe that you can change a person into shaming. But there's not a shred of evidence in the research anywhere that ever found that to be true. In fact, there's a ton of evidence that found the opposite. The more you shame somebody, the more you reinforce the behavior that you're trying to change in that person, because what they do is, shame is so stressful that it causes you to shut down. So you don't look at it, and so and because you don't look at it, you don't see through it, you don't get beyond it. You don't take responsibility for it to move through it and change let awareness change it for you. And so one of the things you found, the one variable, is that people who are not shame based, is that they wake up every morning and they thank whatever, God, universe, all that is, nature, for this beautiful nature that's that they placed inside of them. They may think of a beautiful, how beautiful the ocean looks, or a beautiful meadow. They think of something beautiful in nature, understanding that that same nature is inside of me, and they give gratitude for it, you know, and they come to the understanding that whatever happens today, uh, ups or downs, that truth about me is not in question. You know, if I fail or I succeed, my this beauty, this natural beauty inside of me, it's not in question. It's like that paint that goes up in the air, comes down unaffected. I'm unaffected by it. And that, as you do that, you begin to stop looking outside of yourself for approval. Think of how the enormous change that would make in all the relationships in your life. But you won't be able to do that unless you bring into awareness how much of the time you are seeking approval, or how much of the time you are resentful because you didn't think you got it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, all those reactions that you're having and all that stuff that you're carrying, you know, but it's a turn inward. Is it it's it's approving of myself. It's understanding that what I am as I am is good enough. Carl Rogers has said, is what I am is good enough if I can only be it openly. Well, that's awareness. That's awareness. Being open to what's going on. So you got a kid, you know, one of the things that I took me a long time to discover is when I'm working on a complicated project, you know, and I've worked in huge departments with lots of strategic issues and personnel issues. So you're working on this very complicated thing, and you're focused on it. You're giving your best to it, and it reaches this point where your mind and body and brain and spirit tells you, "I'm exhausted." You know, I'm moving into the direction of hating
Yeah.
this right now. I used to push through. You know, the way you're taught in the world, push through, just keep going, give it another 2, 3, 4 hours, stay here all night until it's done. And I started paying attention to that. And all right, I'm folding it up, I'm closing my door, I'm walking out in back home, I'm going home. And then I would come back in the next day and I would see it so much more clearly, and I'd make a change, I'd finesse it in some way. And I discovered over and over and over again, it produced a great outcome. Whereas the other outcome, there was always, you could see the shabbiness in it because I was using negative energy. I was using upsetting energy. I was using energy that was moving in the direction of stress because my body was trying to tell me, "Lee, just let me have a break." You know,
Yes.
people don't take a break. They just don't take it. I try to encourage business people to take a 20-minute break in the morning and 20-minute break in the afternoon. Although science tells us to take a 20-minute break every 90 minutes. They've
I've heard
discovered
that.
that's the truth, and it's how a violinist becomes a master of the violin, and
Mm-hmm.
why somebody becomes good at the violin, um, but doesn't become a master because they keep pushing.
Yeah.
After the 90-minute rehearsal, they don't take a break. They just keep going. They're very competitive, you know. They, but that's what I discovered. Well, yeah, it's really true. The product that I produce, the thing that I'm going to create here is going to last because it's of value. Because I worked a process that infused it with value, with the best that I have to give with it, not the burnout me, but the
Mm-hmm.
best that I have to give with it. So that's if you can get kids to see that, you know, in the middle of them going, I can't do this anymore. Why do I have to do another one? Is let's step back and let's kind of get in touch with those feelings. Forget about the homework for a minute, all right? Other than this is the source that you this is the reason you think you're getting upset. Then let's step into the upset and be with it.
You know, I actually
Talk about
did
it.
that, and they said it wasn't the work, it was having the mom yell.
Yeah. So they now they're getting the understanding. And then that's beautiful. That's one of the things, what you understand begins to change for you. It's much less pressure. So they go, okay, it's not the work. That's, the work's okay. So now they've changed their relationship to the work, right? It's my mom. And what do what do I do about my mom? Well, I'm going to try to change my mom. Well, good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
It's like Viktor Frankl said, when you're in a situation you can't change, you're called upon to change yourself. So let's kind of think about how you could be different with your mom when your mom's being like that. How can you be different inside you as your mom is coming down on you in that sort of way, in a way in which that doesn't activate you in this negative way, you know? And will you be willing to try this for a couple of weeks? Because it's not going to happen you're not going to produce a lasting change the first time you try this. You're,
Right.
you're going to grow and you'll come to an understanding. You'll begin to understand my mom's fearful. My mom's
Yes.
fearful for my future, you know? My mom's fearful that she won't look good to her friends if she has you know, a a a kid who's underperforming.
A child who makes
My
mistakes. Yeah, and that's what's telling.
Yes,
Because I said, in here, mistakes. I sometimes tutor at a park. On this blanket, mistakes are perfectly fine. And then this one kid said, "Can you?" That's not what my mom said. And that's when you realize.
and
But
you know
but
that I give it. When people say that, I tell them about Watson, who grew IBM into the giant that it is. He used to go to his scientists, his computer scientists, and last thing he would say at the end of a meeting, he said, "Now be sure you make enough mistakes, because it's through the
yes,
mistakes that you learn. It's out of embracing those mistakes, out of not shaming yourself for those mistakes, that you grow." There's a company, 3M. It's the most innovative company in the world, one of the most innovative. They have, I forget, like 50,000 products that they've invented over the years. Well, they have what's called the 15% rule, and they demand of all of their scientists that they take at least 15% of their time to do whatever they want with. And it doesn't have to be, shifting over to another 3M product, anything they want. And there's this guy named Art Fry. He had a choir that he was the choir master of at his church. And so he was taking his 15% off. 15%, that's almost a full day. That's almost like leaving work at 10 o'clock on Friday. It really is. And they do it. The most innovative company in the world, that is core to it. Well, Art Fries, they actually have gardens that they have them to walk through. They have lounges for them to lay down and take a nap if they want. So Art's walking through the garden, thinking about his choir, how much time it takes, because he said, okay, everybody turn to hymn number, blah, 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 and everybody, I can't find it. And so out of that, it dawned on him that he could invent a glue that could create a little note that they could stick it, and out of that, Post-its were
post
invented.
it.
And that's how Post-its got invented. Well, they didn't get invented by putting your nose to the grindstone, did they? They got invented out of this. His creativity opened up, and our creativity is infinite. It opens wide, and he runs back to his lab. Now, I mean, I think it's like 25% of 3M's revenue, all for a little walk in the park thinking about his choir. That we got to begin to hear those stories and relate to the
Yes.
what are they saying to you? You got to figure it out. They're saying your attitude is everything. They're saying that free time is Einstein said that that all of his discoveries were made during free time, when he just sat in his chair and he smoked his pipe. He had a name for it. I forget what it was. He'd spend hours there, smoking his pipe. And he said all of his great discoveries came out of that. What he called it, he said, creativity is the residue of time wasted.
I love that because
Yeah,
I
it's a
have
great.
this thing about like productivity, you need to make the most. And then
We all
recently
do.
I'm trying to make more time for meditation. And then as I'm laying there, I'm like, oh, I should be doing. And then it really is rewiring, which is why when I came across your book and DeMello's books, like this is what children need because we
Yeah,
are programmed not to waste time. I had a 14-year-old who said, I need to be productive. So at age 12, she made this planner how she can be more productive and she needs to at least complete 3 things and I'm thinking she's 14 but to not see wasting time as a negative
yeah.
belief.
It's not a negative. It's a place of creativity. And my grandchildren, when they were little, I'd throw a ream of white paper on the dining room table and 5 or 6 packs of crayons out there. They were gone. They were no trouble for hours. You know, that's still in us. That our nature uh, reflects, from my perspective, it reflects God. It's peaceful. It's loving. It's creative. It loves challenges. It takes on challenges. Um, it Nothing's ever wasted. It's connected to all that is. There's this wonderful quote of Paul Jean-Paul Sartre where he said, "In love, one and one is one." And so when you're working with something like my grandchildren, when I throw the crayons out there, they're in that paradigm. One and one is one. You're at one with everything while you're there in that creative place. And that's in your nature. And this ridiculous society of ours stamps it right out of us. Because why? Because it makes us easy to control. It makes us easy to control, to be productive in the way that somebody else wants us to be productive, to create their widget.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, it makes us less resistant to their control. I mean, that's what it's all about. And the other part of it is, in fairness to the society, is that it's fear based. Everybody's afraid we're, if we wander too far out from the cave, the lions are going to eat us up. Well, we're not in caves anymore. We're not cave men and women anymore. But we haven't evolved. We haven't evolved back into what we were born to be, and is always present and available. You can't kill it. You can't kill our spiritual nature. You can certainly warp the emotional nature that gets overlays it, right? And that can become very warped. But through unconditional love, through empathy, through a willingness to be under where you receive people are received with understanding, that warpedness comes down, and then that light comes on again, and there you are. That's life
Wow.
changing.
It is life changing. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, this is like the best interview ever. Not to minimize the others that I've done, but it is so inspiring because you have. Yeah, I have this project and see now I'm shifting my mindset because I did think, oh no, I have to like answer these questions for a radio show. Am I going to seem competent? Can I do this? And just what you said during this time, it is amazing how you can shift from oh no to wow, what a great opportunity. So
Yeah.
thank you so so much. I am going to look up the mindful
Or if it
schools.
doesn't if it doesn't shift to it, oh, what a great opportunity. If it's still like, I don't like doing this, it's, I've got to do this. So better way to do it is not to judge it in this negative way and stress out of it. I'll
Yes.
get through it. It's sort of like, I'll show you how to do it. You see, just do this, you do that, you do this, instead of like, why would you
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. Or yeah, just 10
That's what
minutes,
I've
10
been doing.
minutes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Don. I
All right.
really, really appreciate it. Have a great day. And I'll let you know when I air this interview. Thank you so
All right.
much. Okay, take
Thank
care.
you. And thank you for what
Bye.
you're doing in the world.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.